the flagship program in this state, right? And
A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports here on a Tuesday evening in the beginning of September, the year of our Lord 2024, September 3rd, 9:43 p.m., less than 48 hours before the kickoff of the 2024 NFL season. And we are here tonight to talk about some actual meaningful football that finally took place over the weekend in week one of college football. We're going to recap four games, four of the biggest games of the weekend in their entirety, our takeaways, what it means going forward. We're also going to talk about Florida State fans, if you're tuning in, what's happening with Florida State, a team that we thought was going to be at least contending for the playoff and contending for a conference championship, and disaster has occurred in the first couple weeks. And then at the end, we might just ramble about how great Scottie Scheffler is, as if we haven't done so already, but he is a Longhorn, and so if we have time at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the Tour Championship. Emmy Nixon is joining me tonight, as he always does. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. If you haven't noticed already, you probably have noticed if you're watching on our YouTube channel or watching wherever. My setup's a little off tonight, and that's because I'm using my phone because I left my laptop at work like a dummy. But we're rolling with it tonight. Oh boy, yeah, it was a bit of a mess. That's why we're starting a little bit late because I was looking for all my stuff. But here we are, and man, like we couldn't afford to miss this episode, man, because there's just so much to talk about.
Coming off Labor Day weekend, we had basically 5 straight days of college football games, Thursday, Friday, the entirety of Saturday. And then we had a game Sunday night, which we'll talk about, and a game last night, which we're also going to kind of discuss, but we're really going to discuss what's happening with Florida State. But since this is deep in the heart of Longhorn sports, we have to start by recapping what we saw, what we took away from Texas's beatdown of Colorado State on Saturday afternoon in Austin at DKR. They kick off their season with a 52-0 shutout of the Colorado State Rams of the Mountain West Conference. I guess, we're now into Michigan week officially. Sark did his game week press conference yesterday. We'll be previewing that Michigan game on Thursday. But Emmy Nixon, when you watch this game, what are the 3 main takeaways that you had?
Well, the first thing has got to be this defense, man. Particularly the secondary. Just freaking phenomenal. Like, just night and day compared to what we saw last year. They were getting up into people's skin. Like, when we talked about it on the preview show, previewing this game in particular, like, I wanted to see these corners and these safeties make some plays, man. And it was a clinic. It was all night. It was like no fly zone, but Texas version, which I'm here for it. The second thing, I gotta give props to these freshmen that showed out on the offensive side of the ball. Jared Gibson at running back. Obviously, it was super late on in the game, but he played fantastic. And then, of course, Ryan Wingo, who was the highest graded freshman out of any player this opening week of college football with a 90.2. Just absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, I would say, like, just the third thing, it was a complete game performance. Like, it wasn't, we played great in the first half, but we let our foot off the gas and we kind of just coasted the rest of the way. No. Like, this was start to finish. This was just about as dominant of a week one performance I've seen Texas have in my lifetime. And, like, for context, I haven't always been a Texas fan. Like, I would say I started becoming a much bigger Texas fan when I moved to Austin, like about 10 years ago. So the 10 years that I've been a Texas fan, like there's been nothing like this, not even close.
What were your, before I give my soliloquy, what were your main takeaways when watching both Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning in what you got to saw both of those guys on Saturday?
Well, I think the big thing with Quinn for this game is I liked how comfortable he looked in the pocket. Like just in terms of his footwork, I could tell it was something that he had put emphasis on. The other thing I noticed was that his throwing motion, like his release point, looked a little bit higher. He's always had a bit of a low release point, and that seemed to be a point of emphasis for him as well. Like there was a few throws where they kind of floated in the air a bit because he was like, because you could tell like he was thinking about getting that release point higher, and then the ball was kind of floating, but it didn't end up mattering. But because he was still very accurate, but that was one thing I noticed. He had a really good game, but one thing I would say is just it was a lot of just first read stuff, and I don't think they were really showcasing a whole ton of the offensive playbook. And it's not like he really had to go through reads in this game. He really just it was a lot of first reads, just wide open, which is great because that's how you know the receivers are separating. But um, we'll see against Michigan if that's the same case. But for Arch, I mean, the touchdown, the first touchdown of his college career. I mean, can he get any better than that? Like, just playmaking, extending, and then turning so that you don't pass the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
Like, and then flipping it over. Like, that was ridiculous. I mean, say what you want about, where the quarterback room is. I think the main thing is just like no matter what happens, like we're gonna have a good quarterback in the game. And that goes for Quinn, Arch, like they're both gonna be able to go in and play at a really good to an elite level, like at any given week.
Depending on what sports book you look at or what betting site you look at, Texas is anywhere from like a 6-point favorite to like a 7.5-point favorite against Michigan on Saturday. And I think part of that is people watched Texas against Colorado State on Saturday and saw the demolition that happened and saw Texas basically look almost flawless as you can look in a football game. No football game is perfect for any team, rarely. And then they watch Michigan play Fresno State and really struggle for a portion of that game, especially on offense. We'll talk about Michigan more on Thursday. But my point in mentioning that is there are a lot of Texas fans right now who think that Texas would still be favored close to the same amount that they are now with Arch Manning as the starting quarterback in that game rather than Quinn Ewers. And I think that just says a lot about what we've seen so far and the short sample size that we've seen so far from Arch Manning. I think it was the first third down that he faced. It was a roll to the right, and he found Jonte Cook running wide open. He hit Ryan Wingo on a couple slant routes. The one thing you notice about Arch is he doesn't lay off those throws. He puts some mustard, if you will, on his throws. He's got good zip on his release. He's just so cerebral. You felt his pocket presence already.
Yeah.
The little time that he's played on that 3rd and goal play where he escapes to the right and flipped it to Silas Bolden. He seems really, really comfortable when he steps up in the pocket, and especially when he rolls right. Haven't seen him go left much, but Really excited. You have to be really excited about what you saw from Arch Manning on the Quinn Ewers side. And look, it's hard to nitpick a 52-0 performance. It really is. Like the only things I can really think of from a nitpick standpoint are Quinn missed a couple throws in that first quarter that he probably should have hit. I think he overthrew a couple of receivers. Jake Majors with the 2 snap infractions that just can't happen, but I'm sure that's week 1, jitters,
Yeah.
working out the kinks in this offense, just getting the nerves out. I don't expect that to happen moving forward, but just some of those pre-snap penalties. And in the end, I don't think Texas was penalized really all that much after that, which was fantastic. Played a really disciplined game. But from a Quinn Ewers standpoint, after a couple shaky drives, shaking off the rust, and after that weird interception where his arm got, hit, I think he would. I don't know. See, the hard thing about that interception is his arm got hit, and it's hard to tell what he was trying to do on that
Yeah,
play.
it looked like he was trying to go to the right, but the receiver to the right wasn't open. And he had a guy down the middle and a guy running a corner route on the left side that
Yeah.
were about to come open. So it was, I don't know. That was a strange play.
Yeah, it was a strange play. But after that, in the second and third quarters, he played like a quarterback that was in his third year starting in the same system. It was really, really good stuff. It was almost Heisman level stuff. In the second quarter, he went 10 of 13 for 120 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 picks for a quarterback rating of 231.26. And he finished the game with a 184.2 quarterback rating, which is like Baker Mayfield levels over the course, Baker Mayfield Heisman levels over the course of an entire season. So if he can give Texas a 180 plus quarterback rating or a 175 plus quarterback rating over the course of the entire season, last year he was in the upper 150s, which is good. It's really like that's a really good college season. But if he can get it up into the 170s, 180s, this is a Texas team that will be probably almost right where they were last year, back in the college football semifinals or somewhere around there. Other than the quarterback play, though, I think a couple things stood out. This Texas team is really, really good. They're really, really fast. I think this overall speed of the team is something that stood out to me on both sides of the ball. There are a lot of people who believe this is the fastest Texas team that we've seen since the 05, national championship squad. They're really, really fast on both sides of the ball, and they're really, really deep. That's really all that it comes down to. It's kind of hard to gauge like what we can actually learn from these kinds of games and what we can't, because Texas they just outmatched Colorado State man for man. There wasn't a place on the field where Colorado State had an advantage aside from maybe the interior of the offensive line against the interior of the defensive line on a couple plays. But overall, like if I had to give out some game balls, Jalen Gilbo, the hype that we heard over the course of the spring into fall camp, playing that star position and, being tasked with guarding Torrey Horton for the majority of the game or a lot of the game. He might have been Texas's best defender, aside from Anthony Hill on Saturday. 8 tackles, had a couple pass breakups. He looked really good. I thought Jahdae Barron, remember, if you remember what I said on our secondary preview, I said Jahdae Barron, the one thing I want to see from him this year is more playmaking. The way that he tracked that deep ball down and intercepted
he baited him.
that's the kind of stuff that I want to see more of from John. If he can do that kind of stuff pretty consistently this season, he could end up on an All-American team. Like, that's the kind of stuff that separates good from great and great from good. And then I thought, I think it says something that on the third play of the game, Colin Simmons was in. I think he's more of a sub package player right now. I don't think he's a starter, but I think Texas really, really likes him, and he's going to be a guy to watch. Like, how early on do they get him in the Michigan game will be interesting to me. The defense was really, really good, though, and they didn't take their foot off the gas. 0 points allowed at halftime. They allowed 78 total yards in the first half and less than 200 yards for the game. And they end up with 2 interceptions, including the Wardell Mack interception at the very end to preserve the shutout in the end zone. And I just like how Quinn and these quarterbacks spread the love offensively. We talked about wanting to see the wide receiver rotation, and pretty much everybody aside from, DeAndre Moore got their opportunities. In terms of the first half, it's pretty clear to me that Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden are 2 guys that it seems like Quinn has developed pretty good chemistry with. But, later on in the game, they started to get Jonte Cook more involved. They started to get Ryan Wingo touches. He ended up being the leading receiver for the game. In the end, Silas Bolden didn't get as many looks as I thought he would, but he did score that touchdown, and he had a good punt return, so he still made an impact. I thought the receivers just showed us their explosiveness, their playmaking, their speed, and that's where we won't talk about Michigan right now, but I think just in terms of the speed overall in this Texas team, the speed and athleticism is somewhere where I really think Texas has an advantage on Saturday. I don't know that Michigan can match their speed man for man. But overall, this is what a really good championship caliber football team does to inferior competition. And that's why you find Texas ranked now number 3 in the country. They move up ahead of Oregon, who struggled with Idaho on Saturday. So we'll talk about Michigan on Thursday, but do you have anything else that you want to add before we move to another game?
Well, I do want to say, real quick, the way that Sark was coaching up Arch, right at the end of the game, that last drive where Texas didn't score, Arch had that play where he was running around trying to find a player, and he kind of threw it into traffic. And if you watch after, once Arch got to the sideline, Sark got all the way up into his skin and was coaching him really hard. I think that's such a good sign. It's clear that everyone is really bought into this thing right now.
Absolutely. All right. This is where the fun starts, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about this game in the Sunshine State. The Miami Hurricanes were favored by 2.5 during our preview show late last week. And this is a game I think both of us thought was going to be relatively close, even if we had, Miami winning one way or the other. But Miami, man, they just ran roughshod over Florida. And so I guess let's start with the good, and then we'll address the bad with Florida. What did you see from Miami in this game?
Well, I saw a football team that they found their quarterback, and it just seems like whenever a team finds their guy, everyone just responds to that. When certain football teams, there's been certain situations in the NFL sometimes when, a starter is in there and then the other guy comes in at quarterback, but the team believes in this guy more. So they just They respond to it. Like, and then the team all of a sudden finds a new type of energy. That's what it felt like with Miami. Obviously, it wasn't an in-season change or anything, but it just seemed like a team that had ultra confidence and complete belief that like we can beat anybody because we got that guy at quarterback. And like Cam Ward wasn't perfect. He's still a little bit reckless with the ball when he's scrambling out of the pocket and things of that nature, but he's incredibly accurate. I think his pocket presence was really impressive in this game when he stayed in the pocket, and he was extremely accurate as well. So, I mean, I think that's the big takeaway. I think they found their quarterback, and then from there, the culture that Cristobal had already been trying to build actually came into fruition in the game.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think this is a Miami Hurricanes team that in year 3 under Mario Cristobal finally lived up to some of their offseason hype. Dominant 41-17 win at Florida. Cam Ward looked spectacular, as you mentioned, which is huge. Like, a quarterback can really transform the outlook for a season. If you hit right in the portal, it can really transform the way you look at the expectations for the season. I think Miami has done that here, along with the way that they've been recruiting under Mario Cristobal. With Cam Ward, but there are other offseason transfer additions. You talk about Damian Martinez, the running back that they go get, the first team All Pac-12 running back that they go get from Oregon State.
Yep.
Like, and all these other moves that they've made on both sides of the ball, these investments are paying off big time already. It's only 1 week, but Miami looked like the best team in the ACC by a wide margin. Like, it's not even
It's not close.
remotely close. Virginia Tech put up a dud against Vanderbilt. Congratulations to the Commodores for pulling that upset. Clemson looked awful. Well, I take that back. Clemson looked like a team that did not use the portal against a powerhouse in Georgia. I shouldn't say Clemson looked awful because they actually kept that game within one score for a large,
Yeah,
like
for quite a while.
basically
Yeah.
the entire first half.
Right.
But Florida State's looked terrible. We'll talk about that near the end of the episode. Stay tuned. And there have been some other disappointments. It's really been the bottom of the conference that's kind of risen to like the middle of the pack or near the top during the start of the season. You talk about a team like Boston College, who looked good last night. You talk about a team like Georgia Tech, who's looked fantastic to start the season. NC State struggled, but they should be pretty good. They have a huge game this weekend in Charlotte against Tennessee. I thought, though, for Miami on defense is where I really was impressed against this Florida team. I thought, their tackling was on point for a game so early on in the season. There's always a concern with very few opportunities to bring guys to the ground in camp to practice tackling in live settings. But I thought Miami's defense generated a ton of havoc. When they had opportunities to make plays, they made the plays. And it's clear that this entire football team, but the defense in particular, has the right mindset. I thought the secondary really answered the call. Because Graham Mertz early on in the game was testing this Miami secondary. And they really did a good job in coverage. I just thought overall it was a dominant performance. And it's big. Like, I guess now let's address the Florida side, because we talked about this in our preview show. The loser of this game, the hot seat was going to start to get even hotter if it wasn't the hottest it could already be already. So in terms of Florida, what's your overall biggest takeaway, or what's your overall message to Florida Gators fans right now?
I mean, you didn't see progression from them as a team, like as a whole. Like that's the real problem to me, and that's like an indictment on Napier as a coach right there. And I know it's week one, and every team has things to work on, but blown coverages, that's the thing that killed them all of last season. And then you see it pop up again this game. Like the changes that they made all off season and the things that they preached all off season, the things that they were telling Josh Payne on his show. Like, I just can't help but think like whatever it is they're doing is not clicking. Like I think it just might be time to try something different. I really do. And at this point, I don't I don't see it. They're players on that team that are very talented, clearly. Like that running back with that long touchdown, I think in the second quarter to cut it to a touchdown lead. Like that was one of the most impressive plays of the weekend, but they can't sustain it is the problem.
Yeah. Number one, you mentioned this, no defensive improvement that I could see. The Gators were dreadful on defense in the latter half of 2023. They gave up 39 points to South Carolina, 43 points to Georgia, 39 to Arkansas, 52 to LSU, 33 to Missouri, 24 to Florida State. A Florida State team without Jordan Travis at that point, and we know, what that looked like in that bowl game. So that's kind of a lot. And look, I mean, Miami rolled into the swamp, and they racked up 529 yards of offense, 385 yards through the air, 7.7 yards per play. And Miami could have easily scored 50 points if they really wanted to, in my opinion. Maybe even more than that, maybe even closer to 60 points. The defense just doesn't look good, or didn't look good. They had some offensive line issues. That was a significant problem last year. But, the optimism that was kind of unfounded during the course of the player development period in camp didn't look particularly good going up against that Miami front seven. My question for Florida is, are you going to part ways with Billy Napier during the season? Because I do think there is one kind of get out of jail free card that Napier has if he wants to use it, or if he feels like he needs to use it, if he feels like he's not getting the most out of Graham Mertz, who was actually one of the more underrated quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but in the country last year.
Yeah, he was good last year.
But if Napier feels like his seat is really heating up to the point where he's got to do anything possible to try to salvage this, if there is anything that he could possibly do to do it, I don't know that there is. But he does have a 5-star quarterback in DJ Lagway sitting behind Graham Mertz, an immense talent in DJ Lagway from the 2024 recruiting class. He is a freshman. I know this is an extremely brutal schedule, which is one of the other reasons why Florida really couldn't afford to lose this game. It's because there are not many guarantees. There's maybe 2 or 3 guarantees on their schedule from here on out, if you really look at it. But Graham Mertz wasn't good enough if Napier feels like he's got to do something to try to save his job, it might be is it time to pivot, or do they pivot to him as the starter? Because once you fire the coach, DJ Lagway can say, fuck it, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then you're really left with, the new coach is probably going to have to do a ton of work anyways. in recruiting in the portal to rebuild this thing from the studs. But like that guy was, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the country this past recruiting cycle. So I don't know that you want to lose that guy. So it's kind of like a thing that they have to balance here, because the moment you fire Billy Napier, that staff goes, and these players who were recruited by that staff and might feel loyalties to the staff for whatever reasons can dart after the season. So,
Yeah.
Look, Florida AD is probably not going to be making decisions based on that, but it is something that I think Napier has to think about. That could be kind of his one get out of jail free card. Because if you put in Lagway and he starts playing really well and you kind of turn things around, you can make a bowl game possibly somehow. I don't think it's going to be all that likely looking at their schedule, but could happen. Because, the quarterback's the tide that raises all boats. So we need to move on, but I have mixed thoughts and feelings on Florida.
Yeah, we'll see what they turn into throughout the season. We're going to find out very soon.
Yeah. Question is, is Napier the coach when they come to Austin in November? That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting.
Everybody is saying no, but I still do think there's a chance he stays the season.
I agree. Okay. Your thoughts on this one? Notre Dame and A&M, 23-13 Irish.
Well, just the flagship program in the state, hosting a big game, doing what they do, which is lose big games at Kyle Field. Like, think about it. When's the last time A&M hosted a ranked team at Kyle Field and won?
It's probably that big win over Alabama a couple of years ago. Can't remember exactly.
That's probably the only one you can think of, right?
Yeah.
They're not like that. Anyways, that's a rant for another day. Sorry. Let me not get carried away. The game itself, man. Wow. This was a game where A&M could have easily won, I thought. And really it just comes down to Notre Dame's secondary single-handedly won them this football game, in my opinion, because their defense playing so well bought them time to be able to have that Notre Dame run game wear down that Texas A&M defense. And then all of a sudden, third, fourth quarter, the floodgates opened and they start railing off 20-yard run, 30-yard run, 35-yard run. And it was over after that because Texas A&M couldn't move the ball.
This game, it felt like when Notre Dame scored that touchdown. When was it? Early fourth quarter?
Yep.
When they had that 85-yard drive, went down, scored the touchdown, took the lead by 7. Felt like the game was over at that point. Look, a lot of the concerns I had about the Notre Dame offensive line, an offensive line that came into the game due to injuries and players departing, just natural attrition year to year, that 6 combined starts coming into Kyle Field that I was concerned about going in. A lot of those concerns came to fruition. Early on in the game, Notre Dame was shooting themselves in the foot with pre-snap penalties. Thought the crowd noise, just one of the main reasons that people perceive it's so difficult to play at Kyle Field, because it's 108,000 people. It's the largest, stadium in the SEC. So I've never been. I wouldn't be able to speak from experience. I'm sure it's a pretty raucous environment, regardless of what you think about the weird stuff that their fans do and the weird shit that they do, which Texas fans like to make fun of. But what Notre Dame did is, they leaned on A&M. That offensive line, they leaned on A&M when they really had to lean on A&M. They created those opportunities for those explosive touchdowns that the running backs had. I think they averaged over 6 yards per carry in this game. And the secondary was just lights out. They capitalized on the opportunities that they had. And there was really no separation or playmaking really from these A&M weapons. These A&M receivers are good players. Like Noah Thomas is a good player. Moose Muhammad's a good player, but Wigman did not play well. He was just all over the place. I don't know what that was. It was just bad. Didn't really live up to what I was hoping to see from him.
Yeah.
Starting the season, Texas A&M ends up losing their starting center to a torn ACL, unfortunately, in this game, so that doesn't help things at all. And A&M, say all you want about Notre Dame's offensive line. I didn't think Texas A&M's offensive line played all that great at home. They were really limited to, I think it was just over 4 yards per carry. So I don't know. It felt like this was going to be a fourth quarter game, one way or the other. After watching the first three and utilizing the quarterback run game with Riley Leonard, making some plays in the run game with Jeremiah Love and the running backs that Notre Dame has. Felt like Notre Dame was able to pull it out. And this is a resume win, the best resume win of week one, in my opinion, for a Notre Dame team that really needed it. If you look at the rest of their schedule, it's really favorable. There's a chance they finish. I think there's a really good chance they finish 11-1, 12-0 possibly, and get into the playoff. I don't think they're an elite football team. I have to see more from Riley Leonard in those receivers before I can say that. But and obviously this offensive line needs to continue to grow and develop throughout the season. But what they are is I don't know how to say this. Are they well coached? Because I don't know, like you can take all those penalties that they had a couple different ways. I think they're well coached, especially on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah.
And look, they didn't turn the ball over. A&M did. And so that helped. I think this was a huge win for Marcus Freeman. It's huge for Notre Dame's playoff chances and their resume. And I just want to see where Notre Dame is at, mid-season. What does Riley Leonard look like in the passing game? What does this passing attack look like? Can they be more dynamic offensively? Because I actually did think Texas A&M, for a large portion of that game, should have won the game.
Yeah.
And had the better players on the field, more athleticism in most places, but turnovers and when things get a little tight, those things can happen. So good for Notre Dame. I did not think they could win this game. I was wrong. But good on them for doing it. It's a huge win. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on basically everything, but the last thing I'll say is I didn't think Colin Klein's game plan offensively was very creative. Let's just say that. Is your plan really to just line up and say our receivers are going to beat your corners? Just watching 5 minutes of Notre Dame, you'll know that this secondary is probably on a list of 3 secondaries in the country where you gotta have some motion. You got to do something. You got to have some window dressing with this group because you're not just going to beat them straight up. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Okay. This game happened Sunday night. Another game I got wrong in my picks from last week. USC pulls out the win over LSU 27-20. What are your thoughts?
I actually picked USC, if you remember. I think
You did.
I
You
mean
did.
it kind of went the way I thought it would if USC won, because like I wasn't too confident in the pick. I was just I was making a pick just based on the fact that I wanted to choose at least one upset. I just happened to get it right. I'm not gonna take that much credit, but like the main thing is I think a lot of people over exaggerated the downfall of USC. Um, Obviously, Lincoln Riley kept his defensive coordinator around too long, but D'Anton Lynn moving him over from UCLA and then getting all of these guys in the portal, like the defense was just different, man. Like and with that defense, you're going to win a lot of football games if Lincoln Riley is your head coach. Like that's just the bottom line. I didn't think that Miller Moss was perfect. I didn't think, he had to be, which is a breath of fresh air for USC because there's been so many times, so many years in a row where their quarterback has just had to be Superman, and Miller Moss didn't have to do that.
Yeah. This is a big win for USC on a neutral field over an SEC opponent. I thought Miller Moss, while he wasn't perfect, put up a really nice performance, 27-36 for 378 yards, and a touchdown. On their final two drives of the game, he went 7 of 8 for 104 yards and a touchdown. Led both of those drives, resulting in touchdowns. It was a really nice performance from Miller Moss. I thought the defense, the front seven especially, looked much improved. D'Anton Lynn probably has a lot to do with that. And look, if they can get that kind of defense, it doesn't have to be elite defense. It was a front seven that went against one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in the entire country. Like there are minimum four NFL offensive linemen on that LSU football team. And it's one of the best individual position units in college football. And they ended up, limiting LSU to 117 rushing yards on 26 attempts. And they made life consistently challenging for LSU, despite not having a sack and only 3 tackles for loss. Big time credit to USC for coming ready to match LSU's physicality, for coming ready to battle in the trenches. Because if they didn't win the trenches, they at least neutralized the trenches. And if they can do that in a lot of their games this season, in the majority of their games this season, they can be a college football playoff contender. Because I think Miller Moss, I trust Lincoln Riley's track record with quarterbacks. He's just going to keep on keeping on and pumping maybe not Heisman winners out at the rate he was at Oklahoma, but just really good, like first round caliber, high draft pick caliber quarterbacks that can play on Sundays. And then USC, I mean, they've got some weapons. Zachariah Branch is just spectacular.
Yeah.
They've got some dudes on the outside. They've got some playmakers. So I think there are still some questions about, their offensive line, their ability to open up running lanes. I want to see their front four, get home at a more consistent rate, and the level of the aggressiveness from the secondary. But all those are questions for another day. Because if you're USC, you're just on cloud nine right now because of this win. So I haven't looked at. Go ahead.
You beat a team with arguably the best two tackles in the country, arguably. Obviously, there's a guy at the University of Texas that we would put in the conversation, but I mean, probably the best tackle duo in the country that you beat that team. So it's like there's not going to be a whole lot of offensive lines that are going to be way better than what you just faced. So it just kind of just gives you that feeling like hey, we can compete.
Yeah, good on USC. Good for the Big Ten too. USC moved up 10 spots in the rankings. As you can see, they went from 23 to 13. LSU dropped 5 spots, going from 13 to 18. Okay. Kind of the final
they're
thing.
Still ranked 18.
Yeah. I mean, the AP poll, as I said, is kind of worth as much as, the shit I took earlier, but this early on in the season. Later on in the season, it means a little more than it does right now. But A&M fell out of the poll. I think there was another team that fell out of the poll. I can't remember who it was. But anyways, the last thing I wanted to discuss is Florida State. What the hell? What the hell's going on in Tallahassee? Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I have thoughts. Yeah. Man, I watched a little bit of that game last night. I was over at my dad's place, and he was struggling with the DirecTV stuff. I don't know if you heard, but that game wasn't available on DirecTV because of a dispute with ABC or something like that. So I only got to watch a little bit of it. But from what I saw, man, the main point you got to have is like, where is this vaunted defense that we were advertised all off season? Like, where are they?
Nowhere.
Like, I don't see them. Like, I'm just confused. If anything, like, I'm just like, what the fuck happened? Like, I mean, I still think Norvell is a good coach. Like, that's not going to change my feeling on it, but it also doesn't change the fact that he's like 2-8 when Jordan Travis is in his starter. So
that's a good point.
I mean, come on, man. Like, can we get it together a little bit, please? Like, this is getting ridiculous.
The team looks lost. And again, like Florida State, I'm going to crush you guys a little bit here, but I was the one last season that was standing on the table for you guys. So I'm still a believer in Mike Norvell. And I don't think that's going to change regardless of the result this season, although it'll be a massive disappointment. I think even if they run the table and somehow get in the playoff, I still think it would be kind of a disappointment. Because they were picked by a lot to be in the ACC championship game. And I don't know maybe with how the rest of the ACC looks outside of Miami, they could get into the ACC championship game with 2 conference losses. I don't think it's impossible, but I mean, there's no guarantee with how they look right now that they're not going to lose 1 or 2 more conference games. Because I think they still got to play Clemson. I think Clemson could beat this Florida State team the way that they look right now, regardless of how, Clemson looked against Georgia in the second half. They still have some tough games on this schedule. They still got to play Florida at the end of the season. That's a rivalry game. things can go either way in those kind of emotional games, especially if Florida's fighting for a bowl berth, or Florida State's potentially run the table to that point and is fighting for a chance for an at-large bid into the playoff, or maybe they're trying to get into the ACC championship game. But regardless of all that, like right now, this is a mess. Georgia and Boston College over the last 2 weeks have really revealed some ugly truths about both the present and the future of this program. It's an 0-2 start. These were teams that, no disrespect to them, were picked to finish 9th and 14th, respectively, in the preseason. And this
in
kind
their
of
conference, not overall.
yes, in the
Yeah.
ACC. That's what I'm talking about. It kind of like this. At least the start of the season feels more like a rebuild than it does like a reload.
Yeah.
We all know about the attrition that occurred at Florida State. Losing 10 players to the NFL draft, 3 of which earned first team All ACC honors last season, and 6 others who were on the second or third team. So lots of impact players gone. And the fact that FSU has been so bad this early on in the season against 2 what you would characterize, maybe not so much now as you did coming in, but teams that were really thought to be afterthoughts in this conference coming into the season, makes you think, like, did Mike Norvell simply hit the jackpot in the transfer portal over the past couple seasons? And this is simply not a sustainable way to build a winner, because it looks like he's pretty much whiffed in this cycle from what we've seen early on. The 2024 team looks more like the teams that Norvell coached through a 3-6 COVID season and a 5-7 2021 season than it does, and it's far from it, the past 2 seasons, 10-3 and 13-1, as we know last year. Here's my overall point. High school recruiting still matters, and it's the lifeblood of a elite program in today's college football, even in the transfer portal and NIL era. Okay? And there simply have not been enough high school recruits who have developed into stars, or even like consistent plus starters in this Norvell program over the last couple of years. Over his 4 full recruiting classes. Okay? They have an average national ranking of 18.5 in the 24/7 Sports Composite. And their highest ranked cycle was number 12 this past year in the 2024 cycle. That's solid, but it's not the type of recruiting that is going to build the foundation of an elite roster. It's just not. Listen to this stat. Entering the season, only 8 players that Mike Norvell had signed out of high school had started double-digit games for Florida State. It's just like there's not enough contributions. It feels so heavily reliant upon hitting on these quarterbacks in the portal. They did it. They've done it before, and it worked out great. But in the 6 quarterbacks that Norvell has signed from the high school ranks, 6 quarterbacks that he signed out of high school have combined to start 5 games for them, 3 of which have transferred out of the program. Chubba Purdy, Tate, what's his name, Roadmaker, and AJ Duffy. All 3 of those guys transfer. They wanted Cam Ward in the portal, didn't get him. They settled for DJU. They made a significant NIL investment in DJU, and his downfield accuracy, which has been a consistent issue throughout his career, and just his accuracy in general, looks like it's regressed. I mean, it really does. He's not been good. This was one of the most experienced offensive lines in the conference coming in. But they're not generating enough in the run game. And the biggest disappointment of all is what you mentioned. It's been the defensive front. I mean, 190 yards on the ground in the opening loss in Dublin for Georgia Tech, and then shredded again yesterday by Boston College.
Bill O'Brien coached Boston College, by the way. First game as the head coach there, which I think is notable.
None of – and they've played 2 games, so they're different than a lot of these other teams that have only played once. None of their 17 transfers appear to be impact players. 0. And so we knew it wasn't going to be easy to replace Jordan Travis. We knew it wasn't going to be easy to replace Keon Coleman. We knew it wasn't going to be easy to replace Jared Verse. We knew it wasn't going to be easy to replace Johnny Wilson. But man, oh man,
yeah, this is tough.
It just looks like they've whiffed.
Yeah.
In the portal. I don't know if it's bad evaluations. I don't know what it is. But the guys that they thought, that were going to make an impact aren't making impacts right now. Malik Benson, solid player, but I don't know that guy is on the 2 deep at Texas. Is he?
Yeah. No, I don't think he is. No.
So, I don't know. I generally like the Florida State program. I want them to be good.
College football's better when they're good.
And they have been good for the past 2 years. But man, I don't know if there's a way unless DJU in this offense can, and I don't even know that if the offense wakes up, if it's going to fix anything, if the defense continues to look like it does.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You want to have faith. You want to have faith that they can still, get things together. I still think Mike Norvell is a good coach. I still think they have talent on this roster. And you'd like to think they'd be able to get it together and push to try to get into the ACC title game, given that nobody really outside of Miami has done anything near impressive in the conference so far. And you'd like to think that they could potentially get into the playoff when it's all said and done. But again, if you're not getting the contributions that you need out of your high school classes, you're not going to be able to compete at the highest levels of college football. And it doesn't matter what you do in the transfer portal. It just doesn't.
Yeah, and honestly, it's funny because you look at Clemson and it's the opposite end of the spectrum where they're not going into the portal at all. And then for Florida State, it's like they're going into the portal so much, it's undermining just development of young players. Like they have no set culture because they have so much continuity every year.
Yeah, and at least at Clemson, they're getting their young guys on the field. They're giving them a chance to develop. And a lot of those guys, with Clemson, 9-4 last year was considered a major disappointment. 9 wins. Ugh,
yeah,
terrible.
I mean, I'm seeing everybody talk about, fire Dabo. Like it's a fireable offense what he's doing. Like, as much as I don't like it, like until he doesn't win, 8-9 games, like how are you going to fire the guy?
Yeah, exactly. And people, the casual, you know how Josh Pate says, what does he say? He says, smart people can say casual things, but casual people rarely say smart things. Is that his saying? I think it's something along those
I
lines.
think yeah, I've heard it before. It's something like that.
A lot of the casuals will say, let's say Clemson looked awful on Saturday against Georgia. And it's just like, I don't know that they did. I think they looked pretty good. It's just they went up against a team that supplements elite, that does it the right way. They supplement elite, they stack elite talent on top of elite talent out of the high school ranks in Georgia. They do it year after year after year, the way that Ohio State's been doing, the way that Alabama's been doing, and the way that Texas, in a way shorter period of time, but is starting to do under Sarkisian, as we know, over the past 3 to 4 years in his tenure. It's what the elite programs do. And they kind of pick, they get stopgaps in the portal. They're not relying upon 15, 20 players in the portal to come and just automatically pop. They're not relying upon those guys. They're getting and developing these high school elite talents, these super blue chip prospects. That's what you're seeing at Texas right now. That's why they're so deep right now. That's why a guy like Cam Williams won the co-SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week in the second start of his career. It's because Texas is developing, and it's taking more time for some than others. Yes, like Kelvin Banks, it was instant. When yours, he's gotten better year over year over year, but he was ready to play right away. Anthony Hill, ready right away. But for guys like, I'm trying to think of an example. Cam Williams or, Tavondre Sweat or even Byron Murphy. Like, those were guys that were recruited, even if they were recruited by different coaches. And when they got their opportunity, they capitalized on it. And Florida State doesn't have that right now. They don't have the recruiting at an elite level. It's a really good level. It's better than 95% of Division I college football programs. But this is a program that we thought was going to be or needed to be contending for national championships. And they're not. I don't think they're close to that this year. So that's that.
Yeah.
Any parting shots?
Parting shot. Ooh, okay, I do have one parting shot.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave y'all with this. If I'm Florida, I'm writing a blank check for Mike Gundy. I'm just gonna say, like, fuck it. Like, what's keeping him in Oklahoma State anyway? Like, what even is there, like, for you there? Like, come on. Come over down to Gainesville, man, and let's fucking win. Like, blank check.
He is a winner. He's been one of the more consistent coaches in that conference outside of, coaches at Oklahoma since.
Honestly, like, I'm surprised nobody's done that yet. Like, I understand, like, when T. Boone Pickett was alive, like, there was nobody that was going to pluck him away because T. Boone Pickett was going to write the blank check. But now that he's passed away, and rest in peace, of course, but now that he's passed away, it's like, just somebody get this man in an elite program. Like, I honestly think, like, he could be a premier coach in college football. If he's not already, obviously, but
yeah. Well, to those of you who are tuning in live, thank you very much for tuning in and listening live. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel if you like what you do. If you like what we do here. Again, in our normally scheduled programming, this will be an episode that typically takes place sometime Sunday night. I don't know if it'll depend on the week. Probably after Sunday Night Football is when we're planning to do our NFL or college football recaps, or maybe in the morning on Sundays. I'm not sure yet. We'll figure it out, but it'll typically take place Sunday. We'll have our NFL recaps on Tuesdays, and then we'll have a variety of stuff on Thursdays. We're going to try to keep to our Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule as consistently as we can. Things did get a little bit thrown off this weekend, as you can imagine, with Labor Day. But we're back on track. And so this is the first of many college football recap episodes. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you didn't watch the games, hopefully we were able to at least give you a snapshot of what happened and what we saw. And I guess my parting shot would be, thank God for football, man. Thank God for college football being back. And Scottie Scheffler, just wow. He's something different. What is it?
$32 million in his pocket just from that one tournament.
Yeah. He won.
Jeez.
So, not to drag this on any longer, but he won the Players. He won the Masters. He won the gold medal. He won the Tour Championship. He got arrested at a major.
And then shot at 66 the same day.
He won the Memorial. And he shot at 66 the same day. Yes, that is correct. And he won I think he won 8 tournaments when it was all said and done this year, something like that. Just incredible. Won $64 million this year. Just ridiculous.
Gosh, man.
And he overshadows kind of at the end of the day what was, there were some other fantastic seasons out there, as we know. I mean, Xander Schauffele. Other really good seasons. The President's Cup teams are out. I think they were announced today, but we're not here to talk about that. But Scottie, man, boy, oh boy, he's a treat.
Ridiculous. As soon as he put that spider putter in his bag, it was over.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're actually going to be back tomorrow night for our NFL season predictions episode, an episode that you'll definitely want to tune in. We finished all of our team previews, numbers 20 to 1. So if you have not seen any of those episodes, or you just want to go and find your teams, make sure you go and do that. You still have time to do so before Sunday. Tomorrow we'll reveal our actual season record predictions, who we have making the playoffs, who we have winning divisions. We'll talk about the teams that we want to talk about. And then we'll also kind of, near the end of the episode, give a semi-mini preview of week 1, including the game that we have on Thursday night between the Ravens and the Chiefs. We'll have the recruiting show tomorrow. Lots of stuff to talk about there, including the commitment of Jamie French, which happened on Friday morning. We're also on Flip Watch for some defensive line commitments that Florida State has right now with the way their season has started. It's getting interesting there. Some of their commitments that I've watched how Florida State has performed the first 2 weeks. So I'll tell you about that. And then on Thursday, we'll be back to preview the Michigan game, which should be pretty fun. So until then, guys, have a great night. Have a great rest of your week. It is Michigan week, so Longhorn fans, lock in.